Hello and welcome to 1874. It's time for a drop-in show with myself, Dan Bardell. I'm in the wrong place on the video screen. Of course I am, so I'll change that around. There we go. Myself, Dan Bardell, and my good friend from The Athletic, Jacob Tanswell, doing a special show today. We're going to look at Boubacar Kamara and Tyrone Mings and how they potentially fit back into this Aston Villa side, as Unai Emery has stated that they will be available after the international break. Jacob broke this morning as well that Villa are playing a behind doors friendly today as well. So we haven't got any information around that at the moment, but Jacob broke that news this morning. This show is sponsored by NordVPN. Check out the link in the description and you'll find out everything that Nord can do for you. And I believe there's a little image at the bottom of the screen as well celebrating NordVPN. Jacob, how are you?
Doing very well, thank you. Yes, it's been a good week. I always enjoy international breaks in a weird way. You get to just relax a little bit, and you don't have to worry about the next upcoming game and injuries. And it's always good to speak to you as well, Dan. It's been 2 podcasts in 3 days, which is an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. You didn't enjoy talking to me before we came on because I was losing my mind from a technical standpoint. But let's not talk about that anyway. So you broke this morning on X that Villa were playing a behind doors game today against Sheffield Wednesday. I think it was that you said, Jacob. Is this game designed specifically for Tyrone Mings and Boubacar Kamara?
By and large, yes. I'd heard yesterday around lunchtime that the under-21s game would be predominantly made up of a lot of young players, that really young. And
it was a young team.
Yeah, and they did fantastically as well last night. But one of the reasons was because they're going to have a behind closed doors friendly this week, as it turns out today, against Sheffield Wednesday, and it's predominantly to help with Tyrone Mings and Boubacar Kamara to get them up to speed really with obviously higher level of players, barring the internationals. I think it's really important for them just to keep going, gradually increasing their minutes, especially for Tyrone Mings, who's been out since August, has the issues he's had, coming back and having to basically get his legs back up to full strength again. It's a real arduous process. So I think they wanted this game just to get an extra 45 minutes or an hour into him and really step up his recovery.
Yeah, but Emery expected to play as well. Obviously, he's made cameos off the bench and played in the Carabao Cup. But you'd think if they've organised, they've gone to trouble of organising a friendly, you'd think there might be a few first teamers, Nedeljkovic involved as well. I'm sure you'll find out more after this show.
Yeah,
actually, but you'd expect that to happen as well, wouldn't you?
You'd imagine so. Yeah, I'm not aware of anyone else playing in that, but yeah, like I say, I'll find out afterwards. I think for Buendia as well, he's in a similar situation. I think how Emery's handled him as well shows that they've used, one of the comments says the softly approach, and that's absolutely bang on. Really, he's played in cup games, he's played in EFL Cup, EFL Trophy, the 21s, and he's done really well. But he's going to take him a while to get up to speed as well. So, although there's a lot of excitement about these 3 coming back fully fit, you probably say they won't really hit their form till the new year, really, in terms of peak fitness. So it's just about being patient with all 3.
It's interesting with Buendia because I feel like he's come back, but he's entering a more congested area in terms of depth than Mings and Kamara are entering. So maybe it is the softly approach, but I also just think Buendia's got a lot of traffic in front of him at the moment. For Mings and Kamara, that probably isn't the case, is it?
I don't think so for Kamara, because I think for Kamara his ACL wasn't as severe as Tyrone Mings, and like you say, he's one of a kind, isn't he, for Villa in terms of what he can do and what he gives Villa in possession, out of possession. And you say you can bring him back, but I think with Villa's current centre backs, although they're light, they are quite strong. They've got Esri Konsa, who is good news that he'll hopefully be back after the international break. Pau Torres, Diego Carlos, Sil Swinkles, Bogard. So they've got some strength there. You don't have to rush Mings back, but it'd be great to see him fully fit. But I don't think he'll just come in and Emery will push him ahead of schedule because he's got options in that position.
Yeah, let's live in a hypothetical world where both are fully fit, and obviously, look, we accept it's a squad game. You probably don't have a best 11 nowadays, Villa. But we're going to kind of do this podcast in the mind of that Villa would have a cup final tomorrow. Who would you pick? Where would Kamara and Mings play? Because if everyone is fully fit and everyone's operating at their highest level, I think I would want both of those players in the team, Jacob.
That's interesting. I think the best way to think of this is think back to last pre-season when you had Buendia, who I thought was absolutely outstanding over in the States. He hit the ground running, scored a few goals, and you had Tyrone Mings as well. I think Mings knew that Pau Torres was coming in, but it was stressed to him that he would be the number one centre back. He'd be the leader. He'd still be playing alongside Pau Torres and Konsa. They would go as far as changing the build-up structure to accommodate both of the left-footed centre backs. So I think Emery obviously really rates his leadership. I think he's a great asset to have from defensive set plays, which I think Villa have missed at times in the last year to 18 months. And I think he would be really strong. But as I say, we don't know how he's going to come back. If he comes back to Tyrone Mings before, I would agree with you, Dan. I think he comes back in purely for his leadership qualities. But you don't know how he's going to return, how he's going to act. It's going to take some time for him to recover. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's consequential injuries, not big ones, but just little niggles, because obviously the muscle groups that he's having to use, he's not used for a long time.
It is interesting because Kamara is one of a kind in that midfield area. He's probably the most tactically flexible of Villa's players in the number 6 position, and we know that Emery is a huge fan of Tyrone Mings. Like you've just said, Mings was still planned to be in the team when we signed Pau Torres. Obviously, things have moved on since then, and Torres has played left centre back for a year now, pretty much non-stop, barring an injury at the start of the year, and done very, very well. Interestingly, you did a piece on Pau Torres in The Athletic this morning as well. I'm just going to pull up this image, and we'll have to try and describe it a little bit for those that are listening via audio. But this, hopefully it works. Of course, it's not working, so that's the image is completely gone, Jacob. We're not going to, unless you can see it. I can't see it, so the image is not working. Can you see it?
I can't see it, no.
No, excellent. Hopefully we'll come back on the screen. There we go. Bates technology letting us down as per usual. But Villa kind of played almost a kind of opposite of what they did last season, how they started this season in a pre-season friendly game last time round, where Cash was playing right back. He pushed up and offered the width from the right-hand side. They then had Konsa at right centre-back, Mings at left centre-back, and then Pau Torres was left back. But this was at a time where Luca Dean was probably surplus to requirements. Yeah. Moreno was injured at that point of pre-season as well. And in the image that we wanted to put up, Philogene would have been offering the width from the left-hand side. So instead of Bailey on the right, like we did last season, offering the width from the right-hand side, it was flipped, and the right back was the one offering the width on the right-hand side, and the wide player on the left offering the width on the left-hand side. A couple of interesting things from that. The main one being for me is that would Pau Torres still now play on the outside? Would that be the one to play left back? Your piece this morning was brilliant about how Pau Torres builds up the play. I guess in possession, it would still make sense for him to be the left back in that system.
Yeah, well, he's essentially left back now. I think you've seen even more this season. I know it's a small sample size because we're only in October, but he's, average position shows his pass maps, his general play shows that Emery is pushing him into more advanced, essentially inverted left back positions where he can build up the play, where he can step into midfield because he's got the space, because Luca Dean is pushing on into the left wing role. But it's interesting, isn't it? It almost feels like the Mings injury was a sliding doors moment for Luca Dean, because Luca Dean, that meant he had to play, and he obviously started the season well, and ultimately convinced Emery to keep him when there was interest, from Qatar, Saudi Arabia. But you do think, had the season started and Pau Torres was fully fit, a couple of games into the season, you'd have seen Pau Torres at left back and Mings at that in the centre of the back three. And I think for Pau, they've probably got the better balance now, where he's not being isolated out of possession as a left back. I think if you remember the pre-season game last year, I think it was Valencia Villa played. He played left back and he looked pretty ropey, having to defend 1v1 in wide areas. He's not the quickest, obviously, but having obviously Luca Dean's helped him just in terms of he doesn't have to go out wide as much out of possession. But it's really interesting that moment when Mings got injured probably helped Luca Dean. But like I say, I would be very interested to see. I think probably Emery would go back to that with Pau Torres at left back if he was going to fit both of them into the team.
Because the only other option with getting Mings back in, would be that Konsa plays right back, Mings plays right centre back, and Pau Torres plays left back. We had a game last season, I think it was Fulham away, where Konsa was out, so Cash played right back and really tucked in that day to make a back three. Longley played right centre back and Pau Torres played left centre
Yeah.
back, and Villa kept a clean sheet
Yeah.
in that game, and it actually worked quite well because on the ball, Longley didn't get exposed being on the right hand side because he came inside and was the middle of the back three. I guess with the way Villa build up now and the fact they've got two left backs, two really good left backs as well in Maatsen and Luca Dean, you would guess now if they were to do that, they'd be more likely to have Mings at right centre back and him come into the middle than the way that we've just described previously.
Yeah, I think you'd have that, and then you'd have, but then at the same time, yeah, you'd have Konsa in the Matty Cash position that he played at Fulham. So that could absolutely happen as well. I think Mings can play on that side, but like you say, it'll be more of a middle centre back, and that'll be fine. And also, I think Ian Maatsen is probably perfectly suited to playing as a left winger like Philogene did in the pre-season last year, because he's obviously really attacking, basically plays as a left winger anyway. But it's just about how can you fit all the top three centre backs, Mings, Powell, and Konsa, into the same team, and that's the best way to do it. But like you said, like we had a discussion about Duran and Watkins playing up top, there's so many things you've got to figure out. When I remember after the Fulham game, like you say with Longley, Emery changed how goal kicks were set up, and I did a piece on it. So every single detail has a knock-on effect if you're going to include all three of them in there. So it might be like Duran and Watkins, where even when Mings is back fit, it might take Emery a little while just to work out, and be fully confident in the overall structure.
I mean, there's also a world where Mings becomes the cover for Pau Torres, and Diego Carlos is the cover for Konsa.
I think that's more likely, Dan.
We play with two orthodox fullbacks in Cash and either Dean or Maatsen, because Emery said at the start of the season, I don't want to build up with a back three anymore. I want to play in a more traditional manner and have the two centre backs and play with two proper fullbacks. So there is also that world where Mings and Carlos are the backup to Konsa and Torres, and they'd still both get game time because there's a lot of games.
I think that's the feeling now, right? Diego Carlos is a traditional backup, but he's getting a lot of games because either Cash is injured or Konsa's having a few knocks, and he's playing. So I think that would happen with the same with Tyrone Mings. And the first few months, it's going to suit Mings because he doesn't have to play every game. He can ease his way into it. If he starts playing brilliantly, then there can be a conversation. But right now, there shouldn't be too much expectation on Mings. He's had a devastating injury, and another one in his career. And it's going to take a while. It might take him even 6 to 8 months just to be fully fit and fully in rhythm and fully confident and trusting of his body. So if he can play as a backup, which I do think will happen, I don't think, we're discussing potential and hypotheticals, but I do think immediately he's probably going to be a backup. And then you've got 4 really good centre backs. You can supplement that with Bogard if you want to, and Swinkles for a 5th and 6th. And the amount of games they've got, I think having Mings there, would be fantastic. And also just having this general leadership around the squad and match days as well, I think will be a huge asset. And coming on in games when Emery might want to change system or add a bit more height to defence, I think he'll be a great presence.
It's worth noting as well, look, we know Villa have suffered with injuries over the last year or so. But in 2024 alone, Konsa's now had a couple of injuries. Pau Torres couldn't get fit at the start of 2024. Carlos breaks down quite a lot. Mings is now coming back from a long injury. So in all likelihood, the chances of them all being available at the same time and just trying to find a system that gets various people in certain positions, that's probably not ever going to be a thing.
No, exactly. So, if you're on paper, I would say Mings is the backup to Pau and Carlos is the backup to the Hunter. But, Cash, because there's not many right back, if Cash gets injured, that means, Konsa will have to play right back, and then, you have to bring in Mings or Diego Carlos as well. So, like you said, centre backs does feel quite a fragile state, but when they're all, fit and firing, then it's a few good options to have.
Yeah, if everyone's fit, it's great depth.
Yeah,
isn't it? So it's almost perfect because you've got the 4 senior centre backs, 2 left footers, 2 right footers, all offer different facets of the game. They've all got different skill sets. You've then got Swinkles and Bogard and underneath that, who again a left footer and a right footer who offer different things as well. Bogard, of course, can play in various positions as well, so it's a useful player to have on the bench for occasions, for example. So they're in it. If everyone's fit, they've got good depth. Let's move on to the midfield area now and Boubacar Kamara. I think we can all agree when fit, he probably is in Villa's best 11. This is one of the best defensive midfielders in Europe, in my opinion. A big player. Villa really missed him when he went out. Tielemans at the moment, I think, he's one of the first names on the team sheet. Certainly, if I'm picking a team, he's one of the first people I'm marking off as a must start. Barkley, I think, is going to be a really useful player. Will play games, but I think it's fair to say out of the 4 central midfielders, he's probably a backup coming off the bench when
Yeah.
games aren't going certain ways. I think he'll probably know that, but back himself to get into the team and play a lot of games. Where it becomes interesting is Onana is a £50 million player,
Yeah.
but I'm saying I'm probably picking Kamara and Tielemans if everyone's fit, and that then becomes an interesting situation. I guess Onana can play when Kamara doesn't, but he could also play with Kamara if Tielemans doesn't. So again, we're in a pretty good position, aren't we?
Well, yes, Villa are. I think the centre midfield is so exciting, but just in the last few games, or I guess the Man United game, I just felt you'd love Yuri Tielemans in that number 10 role, like threading passes through, especially when Morgan Rogers' final ball's not quite there sometimes. Tielemans is. So I do wonder, having Kamara back, who's so influential in possession, people forget. Like, I was going through his stats this morning as well. He's in the top 10, 15% of defensive midfielders in Europe's top 5 league for touches and defensive touches in the middle third. Passes per 90. If you can have Onana and Kamara, with Kamara sitting, Onana crashing the box, but then have a Tielemans who is fantastic sometimes in that number 10 role, or coming off the left, for example, where Jacob Ramsey's position is, or just behind the striker, threading those passes through in games where you need it. You need that final ball. Villa were lacking that against Man United. I think would be fantastic. So there's a way of getting Onana, Tielemans, and Kamara all in that squad. And there's certain games where I just feel Tielemans brilliant, but I would love to see him a little bit further forward, a bit closer to Watkins and connecting those passes.
He had some good games as the 10. He was one of the main reasons why Diaby kind of fell away, because Tielemans was kind of must start in the second half of the season because he offers so much. And we obviously had Luiz and Kamara at a point who Emery didn't want to take out. So I think that's interesting what you've said there. I'd probably discounted that a little bit in my head wrongly, because Rodgers can play left and come in and make the box, can't he? That can happen quite easily. And then suddenly you got him and Ramsey vying for a position on the left. McGinn maybe isn't playing on the right, and he can play there as well. I said, look, an ideal world very rarely happens, and you don't have everyone available at the same time. But it's fair to say that, from what we've discussed, these two players coming back, it's a big thing, and Kamara in particular, because I do think he'll be more match ready than Mings.
Yeah, I agree. And like you say, you alluded to Emery wanted to play 2 centre backs in the build up and then 2 centre midfielders. And I think having Kamara there would allow that, because you saw last year Kamara would drop into the right back half space and it'd allow Matty Cash to push higher. And it meant if Villa did build with a back three, it was a bit more rotational, because you have a midfielder dropping into the back three rather than Cash being glued there. You can allow him to push further forward, which he's probably more comfortable with doing. So he's so trusted. I know a few times last year he gave the ball away in precarious positions, but it's because Kamara's one, confident enough to receive the ball there. But secondly, he's also being told to receive the ball there because Emery trusts how safe he usually is in possession. So I think Kamara is really important. And like I said, I do think he'll probably come back a little bit quicker than Tyrone Mings. But the concern is that Kamara's had a few quite big injuries since he's come to Villa. So you can't, overwhelm him with minutes, I guess. But if he can just stay on the field, not get sent off and get a run off games in there, I think the Villa will look discernibly different.
I mean, I've got a lot going on in my head here, and I'm going to try and explain what I mean, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it, but it makes sense what I'm about to say in my head. There's so many different combinations and so much that goes into, if you play someone here, you've got to do this further ahead. So Kamara is playing defensive midfield, let's say, and we do go back to dropping him into the back three, and he's kind of like an outside right centre back in a back three. One of the reasons last season that worked was because wherever McGinn was playing, he would then drop in alongside the other central midfielder, which was Douglas Luiz. So actually, picking a team and how you're going to do things, it's so complicated, because you have, because of wants Villa to play, you have to. It's almost, if you do have Kamara doing that, you have to play John McGinn on the right. That absolutely has to happen, because and then Cash is offering the width from the right rather than a Bailey. If you want Mings at right centre back, and Torres pushing out to the left back, How do you do it ahead on the left? Like there's so much that's going to go into these team selections and the build-up structure, because the build-up structure is one of the things that's made Villa so great under Emery. I hope that made sense. I think it did.
No, it does, and it goes back to the point of what we said about Jerome Watkins and Powell and Mings. Everything has a knock-on effect. I think for Villa, how Emery wants to play through studying his teams in the last 3-4 years in terms of at Villa and Villarreal is he likes a box midfield, so he'll have a double pivot. He'll have the left winger coming inside to form as a left number 10, and then he'll have a right number 10, so like a Morgan Rogers, like he's been doing this season. But what's most important is that he has two options running in behind. So one's always Watkins, and then it's usually either Diaby or Bailey. So you can say, we can take out Bailey, bring him on as a bench player, and then bring him again. But you don't have the same balance which Emery wants in terms of players being able to stretch the pitch. So you have to have the box midfield, and like you say, the combinations of who plays in box midfield, especially with Kamara back, is huge. If you're going to play Kamara and Onana, I'd imagine only one of Tielemans or McGinn can play because you probably want Rodgers, a ball carrier on the left. So you can't have too many players that are similar, but there's so many good players in those positions. And like you say, that's probably the reason why Buendia's being eased back in, because he's going to be the next one in line.
Yeah, it's so interesting. People are obviously in the chat and talking about the depth that we have. Villa have built a really, really competitive and strong squad. And, people will often talk about can Villa fight on both fronts. But I think, even from just doing this video and us two having a chat, you realise that, the level of this squad that they've built.
Yes, it's absolutely huge, isn't it? And that's why they were quite comfortable in allowing some of their signings they signed in the summer to leave on loan, because those positions are well stocked. We can all criticise or see weak blind spots at right back or in centre back, but from the number 6 onwards, there's huge strength and depth there, and they're all so multifaceted and versatile, these players. So McGinn can play anywhere in that front midfield 4. Tielemans can play anywhere in the midfield 4. Rodgers can play anywhere. Coaches think from number 6 to number 9. There's so many players that can do as many jobs. So this is why Emery's working 12-hour shifts, right? Because he's just probably going in his head, internalizing all this, trying to think of what's the best rotation, what's the best structure, everything like that. And Onana as well, he's got a complete different profile to anything else Villa have got in terms of how tall and rangy and powerful he is from getting into the box. And he's got obviously a few goals this season as well. So yeah, it's a really exciting time, and they've got depth that can compete with the very best, I guess, in those positions.
You're so right with that, the knock-on effect thing, and like everything, depending on what you do, needs a plan. Like even to the level of let's change the structure for building it from goal kicks. Like literally, there's so much that goes into this Villa team. It's a level. I love football. I like to think that I know a lot about football, but over the last couple of years, I feel like I've just learned so much by being a Villa fan because of Unai Emery and what goes into it. And it is literally at a level I've never seen, a tactical level from any other Villa manager that is anywhere near as sophisticated as what Emery does.
No, there's so many different facets to it, even from opposition goal kicks. So you see at times, I think against Bayern Munich, against Man United, because Yuri Tielemans is not the most athletic and Onana is. Tielemans is trusted to press high if Bayern Munich are going to try and play it from the back, because that means he only has to cover a small space. So if the ball goes over his head, Onana, because he's quicker and has more mobility, he can then cover the rest of the midfield. So Tielemans has been tasked to press. So every single game state, whether it's a throwing on one side of the pitch, whether it's attacking corner, attacking goal kick, defending goal kick, everything is being considered, and what players fit in the best positions as well. I think if you're Tyrone Mings back, for example, he'll take on a big role from defensive set plays. So how does that change Onana's role? All these things are being considered by Emery, his coaches, McPhee, for example. It's absolutely fantastic, and for a guy that I don't know everything about football, but I feel like I'm a little bit of a tactical geek, just learning things from Emery and what he does, and having the time really to study games after them is so insightful, and I enjoy it incredibly.
Yeah, like I say, just sophisticated is how I would describe what he does. I honestly, it's a different level. This is a completely different level, and it shows. Villa are a Champions League team now, so it's going to be a different level to what I've seen previously. But some managers would just send Villa's 11 out and just leave them to it and just see what they could come up with. Emery just doesn't do that, does he? Like, no stone is unturned. Every little detail is fine tuned and analysed, and he changes little things every single game, big things every single game. What a manager! And great. The crux of it is it's going to be brilliant to have Kamara and Mings back, because it's two more options, two very good footballers, and I like both of them, so I'm looking forward to seeing them back in the side. I think either will be in the squad come Fulham away when we're back off the international break, or are we looking to see them for the first time in the Carabao Cup against Palace?
Genuinely, it's too difficult to tell. I don't know how far along they are, but again, look, the game that's going on right now, you can see how they pull through on these games. They played 45 minutes the other day. You imagine they just gradually increase their minutes, and if they come through today, then I don't know. I always thought before this international break, everything was a bit slightly premature, but now obviously they're getting into a period now where you expect them to return soon. So I wouldn't be sure, but Carabao Cup does seem like the perfect time to bring injured players back into the fold, and those on the periphery into the lineup.
Right, I think that does us, Jacob. I've really enjoyed that chat. Wasn't really sure where it was gonna go, going into it, but I think there's just so much to think about and so much to talk about. Hopefully, everyone who's been watching and will go on to watch and listen will enjoy that video, or enjoy this show. Sorry, because I think it's a good conversation to have, and especially in the international break when we can take stock a little bit more when there's no games going on. You just realise what a good position and healthy position this football club's in, if you didn't know so already. Be back on Friday. Conor Harahan has agreed to come on again, so I'll be doing a show with Conor. In the comments, if you can think of anything that you would like us to discuss or talk about, then let us know in the comments, because I haven't actually come up with an idea of what we're going to do the show about as yet, but I'm sure we'll find something to talk about. I know he was at the Champions League game against Bayern last week, said he absolutely loved it, so I'm sure we'll cover that and a few of his to be fair, his mates actually really weren't involved in that game because they were injured, but he said he absolutely loved being at the game. So I'm sure we'll talk about that and some of the Aston Villa topics, both historical and now as well. Give the video a like if you've enjoyed it and you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening via audio platforms, if you could leave us a review, they really help. On Apple Podcasts, there were some really nice reviews. So please, if you haven't left us a review and you're listening via that medium, if you could do that, that would be really appreciated. And I don't know my way around Spotify as well as I do Apple Podcasts, but yeah, do anything that might help on Spotify as well. Leave us a comment as well. What do you think is Villa's best 11 when everyone's fit, when everyone's firing on all cylinders? Let us know in the comments and we'll have a look at a few of them. Again, thank you to Jacob. Thank you for absolutely nothing, Adam Bates. And as always, up the Villa.